Hello and welcome to another episode of the Move Forward Anyway podcast, featuring dream accelerating inspiration. As always, you can learn more about my Dream Accelerator coaching process at jeffmeyer.org. You can click on the Move Forward Anyway tab and watch all of these episodes in video form, or you can download wherever you like to get your podcasts from. I'm your host, author, entrepreneur, and coach, Jeff Meyers. Well, hello, friends and fellow dreamers. We are back again with another episode of Move Forward Anyway, and it's really good to be with you, and really, really good to be with an old friend and brother, colleague, John Busacker. John, would you just introduce yourself to the audience and let us know a little bit about yourself, just to kick us off?
Yeah, Jeff, you should introduce me as a longtime friend, not an old friend.
Oh, did I say old? I'm sorry.
Yes, I just had a birthday yesterday, so I'm a little sensitive here today. So
happy birthday!
Thank you. So I am a writer, speaker, and an entrepreneur. I am on my third career, I would say. I had 2 years as a high school educator and counselor, then 14 years in financial services. And then the last 26 years in the leadership development space, 20 of those years as a partner and then president of a global firm here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And then the last 6 years, we sold that firm. And then the last 6 years, I've had my own leadership practice, focusing on the character and integrity of leaders, which seems like it might be a necessary topic these days.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. Very important topic. And you and I go back some time, many trips. Actually, one trip my wife talks about constantly. I've still never been to Ethiopia.
Oh, yeah.
But you were with her on that trip, equipping leaders, encouraging them and helping them be all that they can be in their missionary calling in the world. And Amy speaks very highly of that trip. And my time with you, I have known you to be a very a good listener. That just someone who really takes an interest in other person's life and helps them sort through some of the difficult challenges. You 6 years ago sold your company, and talk to us a little bit about that process and what came out of that. Why did you launch a new company?
So I would say that it's important to know that each of the transitions from career to career, none of them were planned. So I didn't sit down and map out a life plan and then at certain junctures decide, it's time to make this change. Actually, they just occurred. And so I got into the leadership development consultancy when I was in financial services. We hired one of the founding partners of the firm that I ended up joining, and he did great work with us. I personally enjoyed him, and so I started a conversation over a cup of coffee here and lunch there with him that led about a year later to their asking whether I would join their firm, which at that point had been in existence for about 5 years, whether I would join as a partner, which I did. It was kind of a leap. It was actually really a leap. I was leaving something that I'd been in for 14 years into something that I knew nothing about, was not my background particularly. But 20 years, when I joined, I was the sixth partner. We had 12 investors. Over the 20 years, we paid off all of the original investors, and 3 of the partners were no longer with the firm. The 3 of us that remained had gotten to a point where we all liked each other and valued each other's work, but we were all doing kind of our own thing. We had established our own areas of expertise and domains that we were passionate about. And it was clear to us at that point that the reasons for being formally in partnership just really weren't there anymore. And so I would say one of my proudest business accomplishments is that we ended well. Like when a marriage ends, or when a friendship ends, or when a business partnership ends, most often they end poorly. Somebody ends up angry, bitter. And in our case, the three of us still like each other. We still communicate with each other. It's been a little bit hampered by COVID. We would normally regularly get together individually, one-on-one with each other. So we ended well, but we decided it was time to move on. And so it took us 6 months to figure out how to end well and how to do that equitably and in a way that was beneficial to us as individual partners. But we did it 6 years ago.
Wow. And so then you launched out on your own, and established your new company, right, doing the same things you were doing before.
Yeah. So I had actually started the Life Worth. I had actually started that with, the blessing and full knowledge of my partners about 7 years before we ended the firm. And, wow, the genesis of that, coming from financials, I'm a total right brainer, right? It's kind of scary, actually. I was in financial services, but I cannot balance my checkbook with a calculator. I mean, I'm just hopeless with numbers and analytics, which is scary. If anybody on this podcast was a client of mine, you're probably still working because you're not retired yet. So, but what I've always been interested in since I was a little boy, honestly, it's a God-given gift. It's not something I went to school in, is people's stories. I've always been interested in people's stories. And so about 7 years before we ended our firm, I had this idea to formalize the emotional side of financial advice and to use a tool that I developed called a Life Worth statement. So, if you're paying attention to your finances, you probably periodically put together a net worth statement, assets minus liabilities, financially is your net worth. Well, this takes that same concept, but it blows it up to 10 life dimensions. So your health, your relationships, your spiritual life, your work, your hobbies, and there's 10 of them all together, and says, is this an asset or a liability? And then at the bottom, you figure out your life worth, which was where the name Life Worth LLC came from. Because part of what had developed in my own interest and passion was helping financial advisors really learn the stories of the people with whom they're working. Because financial advice is nothing but arithmetic. And so, retirement planning, this is just totally MSU making stuff up, but I say retirement planning is 1/3 math and 2/3 life. And so this starts to get at the life equation of retirement, or wherever you are in your financial life, whatever life stage you're in. So that was the genesis. And then I just carried that work along with the other work that I was doing with clients forward into this new firm.
One of the things I've learned in working with entrepreneurs and helping them chase after their dreams is that most dreams, I would say probably all dreams at some level, if we take time to listen, are solving a problem. They're filling in a gap that exists. So what is the problem that Life Worth is solving? You've alluded to it a little bit here already, but deeper into it, what's the gap?
So the work with financial advisors is just one part of the work that I do with Life Worth. The other and larger part, honestly, is in the leadership development space, but I would say it's in the soft side of leadership. So a lot of leadership development is focused on more the hard edge of leadership. How do you negotiate? How do you plan strategically? How do you communicate? And all of those things are vitally important. This is not an either or, it's a both and. But my belief and my experience is who you are matters before what you do. And so the itch that I try to scratch in the leadership development space is helping leaders be very clear on who they are. Like, what are your values, and how are you gifted, and what are you called to, and what sense of personal purpose wakes you up in the morning that makes you want to pursue it, and how does that align with the environment that you're in, and once you get that stuff clear, and if you consistently act on it, then people may actually want to follow you.
Mm-hmm.
You're now you're acting with integrity, and the root word of integrity is integer. You're a whole person. You're not half-hearted. You're a whole person. You can be wholehearted. And so in scripture, leaders are commended for wholeheartedly following the Lord.
Mm.
So we try to help leaders be whole and wholehearted. And then the other area, kind of emerging area, with the book that a friend of mine, Dave, and I just co-authored, just released February 1st, is in this whole. Yes, that's it. Thank you for the
Gasping for breath.
Yes.
Inviting God's Spirit into your overwhelmed life.
Seems like a timely. Yeah, seems like a timely topic.
Yesterday.
The focus of that is just as the title says. So many. This was true before COVID. It certainly is true now during COVID. People are just overwhelmed, and they're grieving. They're grieving the changes that were unanticipated. They're grieving physical loss of loved ones. They're grieving loss of stability. They're grieving loss of income, loss of job, loss of all sorts of things. And so we try to lean into that with this book, Gasping for Breath, the metaphor being we actually started on it before COVID. The metaphor being many people find themselves now gasping for breath, physically, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, intellectually, professionally, whatever the case may be.
So if I go way back in your story, when did you have the first initial spark that you loved hearing and diving deeper into people's stories?
That's a great question. I can remember even as a little boy, when we were at family gatherings with my cousins. I was usually the youngest, or one of the youngest cousins in my mom's family. There were 7 siblings, lots of cousins. I can remember being the storyteller and the one who would sit and listen to stories. The first home that my wife Carol and I owned, we built. Actually, we rented for a number of years, and then we built a small house in Milwaukee, where both Carol and I grew up. And there were 2 guys that built the house. One was an old master craftsman carpenter, and he had along with him an apprentice. And I was in financial services, just kind of starting at the time in financial services. I went out almost every day to the house as it was being built, not only to do some of the work, painting in advance of them hanging some of the things in the house, but honestly, I just actually loved listening to the old master craftsmen tell stories. It was interesting to me, and it's just always been a part of who I am, and it's been the thread woven through all of the different professions, as a counselor, as a financial advisor, and now in the field that I'm in now, and writing and speaking. It's just always been interesting to me, and it comes naturally, and I'm passionate about learning what makes other people tick. What's their story? Because everyone's got one, and right. It's often kind of a circuitous path. It's not a linear cradle to grave sort of path, right?
Right, no doubt. I think that's why when I described you earlier as someone who takes an interest and listens well, and Amy remembers that trip, and we were going through a really hard, dark period when she was on that trip, and so I know she shared some things with you and shared some things with others on the trip, and the others didn't really pay much attention, but you really listened. And I just think that's interesting, that as people are listening to this podcast, the dream that you're called or you're being nudged to pursue will probably link in very closely to your unique gift sets and values, and that's why it's so hard to not pursue it over time, because you're not being honest with yourself about who you are. And so many of the entrepreneurs I've worked with have felt stripped of that because they're doing work for someone else's dream. but they don't know how to get untethered from it. And it takes courage to think about and to take those steps into the new adventure that you know nothing about.
Yeah. That's so true, Jeff. When I made the change from financial services to leadership development, it felt like the right thing to do. But it was scary. It really was scary. I took a significant step back financially. Carol, one of the real blessings of my life is that Carol's been a partner in that life since we were high school sweethearts. And so when we decided it together, but when I made the professional decision to do that, Carol went back to work in her field as a nurse because we needed the income. And so, but it was scary. I was stepping from something that I knew very well after 14 years of doing it, and something that I was very successful in, to something that I didn't know these partners very well at all. I didn't know the field very well at all. And financially, we're taking a 3/4 of income hit to do it. And yet it felt like the right thing to do. It felt like a calling to go in that direction, because it was even more in the direction of being able to listen to and help people move forward in their own story. That's what we did.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, talk to me about the softer side. You said it was scary. Tell me, share some of the evidences of fear that you experienced. Like, what was some of the self-talk after you made that choice, or as you were thinking about making that choice, or you were a year into it and it got hard? Because it certainly gets hard when you pursue an entrepreneurial venture like this. What were some of the things that you were saying to yourself in those moments?
I have a friend. He became a good friend. He was a client that was with one of the large global companies that we worked with for about 7 years. And he used to ask the question, it wasn't his question, but he used to ask, so when was the last time you did something for the first time? When was the last time you did something for the first time? Because we can easily kind of get into a rut doing what we're doing. We kind of and the deeper the rut can become a grave, actually. So, so in the previous life in financial services, after 14 years, I was doing a lot of things that I had done before. And then when I stepped into this new field, I had never done almost everything that I was doing. I mean, the first couple of weeks, every day, and certainly the first years, I found myself in places regularly where I just have never done this before. And that is fear-inducing. I mean, it's kind of exhilarating, but at the same time, it's like, man, I could colossally fail at this. And it was coupled with when I made the change, the firm was nice enough to give me a little bit of a guaranteed income, but most of the income from day one I had to earn it. I had to get up and kill it to eat it, sort of thing, every day. And that's fear-inducing too. Even though I'd been in a commission-based world for 14 years, I'm in a new place, having to earn an income, doing things I've never done before. I mean, the physical evidence of that was that, my armpits were sweating like every day. It's like, holy mackerel, this is. But I actually, again, now with the benefit of hindsight, I look back and go, man, that was also very life-giving. It's fun to try things. Some worked, most worked, not everything worked. But again, having a life partner, having Carol along on the journey, big part of it. Knowing that, hey, this might augur in, but I'm still loved. I'm still okay. I've got a wonderful home in which I'm living and growing, so yeah.
The partnership aspect is severely underrepresented when we talk about entrepreneurship. I mean, we don't do this alone without the support of a husband or a wife, and it's just critical. So
there's
that
another.
would
Hey,
be.
Jeff. Hey, Hey, Jeff, there's one other aspect to that one too, though, and that's, and from, we teach this. I taught this in the Pastoral Leadership Institute, which is what had Amy and others and me in Ethiopia. But the idea too, and this is critical, I think, it's especially critical for entrepreneurs. It's critical for all leaders to have a small group of people that are on the journey with you. So it's not just spouse or partner.
That's right.
But it's also a couple of other people that will call you on your baloney and hold you accountable to the commitments you're making and ask you the tough questions. And when you're exuberantly high, they don't think you're a narcissist. And when you're just critically low, they don't immediately think you should go into therapy, although maybe you should. I mean, sometimes that's the right solution. But they help level out the journey, especially for an entrepreneur, because my experience as one is that the highs can be really high and the lows can be Grand Canyon-esque low. And so it's important to have a, whatever you call it, a personal board of directors, a sounding board, a band of brothers, whatever it is, to have a small group of people with you, in addition to, if you're married, your spouse.
Well, I think especially because the spouse can't be all things, and can't say all things the same way that a band of brothers can, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So they're people that are interested in terms of, they really care that you succeed, but it's more than that. They're also willing to be people that hold you accountable and to not give up, to continue to move forward anyway.
Right.
Would you say there are other things that have helped you move forward anyway, in spite of your fear, in spite of being scared to death, in spite of pitting out, that you got up the next day and you said, I'm still going to get after this. I'm going to move forward anyway?
Well, I hope this doesn't sound cheesy, because it's just candidly, honestly, the truth. My faith has been an anchor for me. This is not an entrepreneurial thing. It's a life thing. 4 years ago, Carol and I lost all three of our parents, 3 friends and a sister-in-law. So 7 people in 7 months. So 7 people in 7 months, and put us into a season of grief like I'd never experienced in my life. It just came in waves, like a tsunami of grief. And had we not had, both of us had the foundation of our faith, it would have crushed us. It just would have crushed us. And so through the highs and lows, not only of being a small business owner, entrepreneur, not only being the parent of 2 now adult children, being the grandparent of 3 grandchildren, part of what has been just life-giving and sustaining has been my faith, and the growing awareness of a mature faith is a questioning faith. So it's not the same faith that I had as a little boy. It's no longer, and I don't mean this in any negative sort of way, it's no longer a Sunday school sort of faith. It's become a much more mature faith, one that brings the whole enchilada to God, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, there are times during that season of grief that I was royally pissed off at God and would bring it all to him. And there were times when I was exuberantly happy for having the blessing of being able to finish well with our parents. And I brought that to him too, with the gratitude of that, but also my anger and my grief and my dismay and my confusion and all of it. And so, and that's not a Sunday school faith. That's the real deal sort of faith. And so, so that's been critically important, not only as an entrepreneur, but just as a husband, father, grandfather, man.
So you wrote another book. I mean, you've written 4 books, but one of the books I have on my shelf, I don't think I have it right here at the moment.
What?
It deals with,
you don't have it right there?
I think it's at church. Brother. It's going to be okay. But I refer to it often. I look at it often. No, really. I mean, so tap into that book about the questions that how Jesus led with questions and how he welcomes questions. And what's the connection then with that and entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So, great. Yeah. So it's the first book I wrote. It was originally self-published, and then it was picked up by a publisher. It was originally titled 8 Questions God Can't Answer. And it started when I heard Rick Warren. You may have heard of him. He's written a mildly successful book, like 40 million copies worth.
Crazy.
Purpose driven. Yeah, it's crazy. When I grow up, I want to be Rick. But he gave a homily at an event I was at the National Prayer Breakfast, and he was talking, and he said in the middle of this, kind of a throwaway line in his funny sort of way, he said, when God asks a question, it's not for his benefit, because he already knows the answer. He's God. And for some reason, that just struck me. It's like, that's kind of a big idea. Like, so I spent the next several months researching Jesus's questions in particular. And it wasn't just because he was a rabbinic Jew that he taught in that method. It's actually the way that God still today, I believe, teaches. He invites us into questions. He never has, and he never will give simple or simplistic answers. He just doesn't operate that way. And so I wrote this book kind of plumbing 8 questions, the depths of 8 questions that were really perplexing to me, and kind of the question behind the question. So, why are you so afraid as the boat is sinking in the middle of the sea? Well, maybe because we're about to drown, right? Like, duh. But there's a lot behind that question, and it's not just a weak faith. I mean, they were on their way over to the other side, and so what's the other side? And so anyway, the connection here is the best leaders with whom I've worked, and as I've gotten, I hope, a little bit better as a consultant and as a coach of leaders. The best ones I know ask the best questions and are accustomed to and more comfortable living in kind of the in-between. They don't think or have the illusion that they have all of the answers. They're comfortable not having all the answers. They're comfortable asking the question, and not in a leading the jury sort of, leading the witness sort of way. Like, I'm asking a question that I already know the answer to. I just want you to give me the answer so it proves that I'm right sort of way, which isn't the way Jesus asked questions either, by the way. It's I have an authentic interest in knowing the answer, which is a way, again, of drawing people's stories out. And so as an entrepreneur, I have to be more and more comfortable that very few things are actually black and white. There's a lot of gray. And so I have to be willing to ask questions, authentically ask questions, and listen for the answer, and then act on the answer.
Yeah, I think the space to ponder, the space to really think about it and not be flippant with a quick response is really important. What would be some like really important entrepreneurial questions that we could ask in the middle of a dream pursuit, pursuing this new thing? Maybe we can little brainstorm right here. What would be some really good questions for an entrepreneur to ask themselves? So
I love, I mean, it sounds like a broken record. I love asking people, what's your story? What are you passionate about? And some people start to give you kind of a surfacey sort of answer, but then you go, so, what wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat, in a good sort of way, not like in fear, but like, man, that's actually how this book, Gasping for Breath, came to be. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with it. Truly, like wide awake with the idea of writing this with my friend. And so that's a good question. What are you afraid of? What have you done that has given you great joy? What's life-giving? What's life-taking? What what question or issue or opportunity or problem in the world do you think you're uniquely created to answer, solve?
Mm-hmm.
Are all things that I think can be at the nub of what an entrepreneur pursues.
This is not a new one, or it's not original, I should say. It's from Who Moved My Cheese, but one that always has stuck with me is, if you weren't afraid, what would you do? And
great question.
And yeah, I just think that the questions are the most important thing that help us unlock understanding. Another one I like is, what is trying to happen here?
Mm-hmm. It's a good one. It's great.
If we believe that everything changes when we do, what are you called to change right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those.
The other one that I ask half jokingly, but actually not, is, what's the worst that can happen?
Mm-hmm.
What? So if I do this, what's the worst that can happen? And then pursue really, and then pursue it a little bit really. And so a lot of times the fear that I have of pursuing something, assuming it's a good thing, the fear is actually irrational. Like what I think the worst that could happen, like, I'm not going to die trying this. I'm not going to lose everything trying this. I'm not going to completely lose my reputation or face doing this. So what's the worst? Well, the worst is that I fail and I learn a lot, maybe. Or
right.
Yeah.
In our dream discovery and dream demonstration process, I ask, well, what are the risks in going for it for you? And most people that I've led through that question are pretty clear. They just kind of rattle off all the risks because they've thought about all the risks.
Right.
I could fail. I could be found out as a fraud. I financially could lose a whole bunch.
Yeah.
But then I flip it and I ask, what's the risk if you don't go for it? Like, what happens if you just stayed in the same lane doing the same thing and nothing changes? Where will you be 5 years from now? What's the risk if you don't? And that's when I see the softer side get pulled out. I see emotion then, because they're like, I haven't really thought about that before.
Right.
And it's even more scary to think about not doing it than doing it. Oh my gosh. One guy said to me, I have to do this.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. I can't not do this.
Yeah. Yeah. What can't you not do? That's another great question.
Right. Right.
Oh man. It is so enjoyable to talk to you. Please give Amy and my love to Carol.
I'll do it.
And I look forward to someday reconnecting and having some good, slow conversation and get reconnected with what's going on in our lives. Thank you for being on my Move Forward Anyway podcast, and for the encouragement you have brought to my audience here. And if someone wants to get in touch with you or learn more about what you're doing, how do they reach you, John?
So the two, one, I would encourage, if you want to, just shoot me an email. So my email address is Busacker, Busacker at John, JOHN, Busacker.com. So just personally email me. Or the website for our new book is Gasping for Breath. Yep, just like it looks in the title, gaspingforbreathbook.com. And there you'll have a little bit more on the bio and a little bit on the book. And if you're interested, you can just purchase the book right off the website. But that will give you a little bit more insight as well.
Yeah, you can also sign up for a newsletter or email news about the book or anything that develops from the book. You also learn something about David Johnson. I got to go on today and learn a little bit about David Johnson. So that's awesome. Thank you for being encouragement in his life. I know that you have, as he has for you, but it goes both ways. And it's really cool that you did this together as brothers. And now there's something in the world that's going to help a lot of people. And that's the bottom line with our entrepreneurial ventures, right? That's why we have to move forward anyway, is because there's something at the end of this the world needs. The world needs what you have that you're thinking about doing. And John and I would just like to encourage you to go for it. And if you need some encouragement, reach out to John, reach out to me, or somebody else to help you move forward anyway. Thank you so much, John, again, for being on. Congratulations on the newest book in your suite of books.
Thank you.
And for the company Life Worth and all the great work you're doing for leaders and for followers, by the way, to help them be competent leaders and be true to who they are. I really appreciate you, brother. Thanks again for the time.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right. Hey, fellow dreamer. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Head over to my website, jeffmeyer.org, for all the show notes and links. And remember, fear will come, fear will stay. Move forward anyway.